Final Stop, Brazil. Book 2, Life After Hell. Chapter 48. New love, new home, and trouble in the air. What a weekend! In my house, I had a lot done. It was almost finished, thanks to Tanya, Marcio, and Pirata. Most of the things were borrowed to begin with, but it was enough for now. I was planning to make it even more beautiful later. I already had so many plans, and this little house fulfilled all the conditions in order to meet my expectations. First, I began the Friday with hope to finally see Geo again. But during the bus ride to Itinga, Tanya called me to let me know about the collective birthday party of her company this evening that was held at the grill restaurant for all colleagues born in June, including Tanya, and I should come there directly. Here I met, in addition to the work colleagues of Tanya, her uncle, who lived in Madrid and was visiting Brazil. It was a fun round. Once again I was hiding my feelings and that my thoughts were only with Geo, but I didn't want to be a fun spoiler. Desperately, I wondered how I could find out where he was, but didn't say anything. Pirata joined the round and sat down beside me, which made me feel a little better. We laughed, joked, took photos that night, and suddenly I got a case for glasses thrown into my back. No one could explain where it came from. I allowed myself to joke and called in the direction of Leo's house. "Leo, it's no use if you throw things at me. I'm here, and I'm going to stay too." All broke out laughing when I added another one. "I hope he's not going to throw knives now." With a pretext of wanting to bring my bags home, I tried to sneak away for a while. But Tanya, not stupid, sent Marcy with me to help carrying it. One day she called after me, "And don't you get the idea to run after that guy?" That was exactly what I had thought of. I wanted to clarify whether I was for Geo, only a one-night stand. Towards Marcio, I expressed my thoughts when we were alone. He promised not to tell Tanya. Instead, he would tell her that I would come back later to the party because I still wanted to tidy the house a bit, refresh myself. Straight away, I went to the street where Tanya, Marcio, and Geo lived. No one was in sight, only Tanya's neighbors. In order not to lose my face, I asked for Tanya. Then Raphael, one of my little friends, a very lovely boy, came riding along on his old rusty bike. Like everyone else in the street, he knew about me and Geo. As always, he hugged me happy for welcome. I asked him to send Geo to the bar if he should see him. I knew I could count on Rafa. Innocent, I returned to the bar, but Tanya found out very quickly what was going on, when suddenly Rafa was standing in the door to let me know that Geo had not yet appeared. My hopes fell that I would see Geo this evening at all. I felt like hiding myself at home and was glad when the guests finally departed. Listless, I joined Tanya to taste a piece of birthday cake in her house. From her apartment, I had a clear view of Geo's house. It was all dark. Tanya tried to calm me by telling me that he sometimes slept in the house of his ex-wife to look after the children. Even worse, not if he was reconciling with her. Very bad-humored, I went on my way home, and when at the corner in front of the bakery, one of those two black men that were hanging around there threw an air kiss at me, I showed him, angry and provocative, my middle finger and went on stubbornly. I was already past when something made click inside me. I turned and looked in a very puzzled face of Geo. Embarrassed and irritated, he introduced me to his friend, who could hardly keep from laughing, and then very quickly disappeared. My way of greeting my namorado was apparently a little strange for him. Before I knew it, Geo had already pulled me into his strong arms and kissed me passionately. Slightly sour, I reminded him of our date on Wednesday night. In between kisses, he apologized by explaining that he had worked long and didn't come home till 11 o'clock at night, so he didn't want to disturb that late. I had long since forgiven him, and noticed only now that he was dressed quite differently this evening, much more handsome than in the old shorts he was normally wearing. He wore an expensive white tracksuit, which showed his shiny black skin and his muscular body even more. Hand in hand, we walked together to my house. Our second night together was even more beautiful than the first. I was much more relaxed and able to admit myself with Joe, because I knew that he did not want to hurt me and tried to avoid inflicting pain. He was the man who fulfilled all my dreams and made me very happy. Tightly embraced, we fell asleep after I asked him if I was very much different to Brazilian women. Different, yes. Better, he replied, which made me very happy and proud. In the morning, I was awakened by Joe with a gentle kiss to tell me that he had to go to soccer training, but he would be back at 10 in the morning. He knew that I needed his help this Saturday. He had promised me already. I reminded him that I counted on him in the afternoon. We got up together and tenderly kissed goodbye. After I had showered and cleaned up a little, I went in a good mood to the baker, buying bread for Tanya, Marcio, and me. After breakfast, Tanya and I got started to buy a second-hand low-priced refrigerator for me. Heading to the bus stop, we met Leo on the way, and against my will, I could feel my heart beat faster. The feelings for him were still there, what confused me very much. Greeting me, he kissed me on both cheeks and patted gently my arm, while he asked with interest where I was staying. Tanya was already gone ahead and talked to someone a bit further when Leo promised he would visit me soon, even though he complained that I didn't call him any more, which irritated me even more. He was using dark sunglasses. I didn't ask him why, since I already knew by Tanya that he suffered from a bad eye infection. I quickly hurried on with the statement that I had many things to do. I almost had to force my thoughts to steer in another direction. Of Tanya, I harvested only a disapproving glance. She simply didn't like Leo, and apparently this was mutual. We rushed and ran by foot and with buses, crisscross nearly through all of Lauro de Freitas, from one end to another. Tanya saw it as a serious duty to push down the prices everywhere, with the result that I had, by lunchtime, spent much transfer money, had bought odds and ends for the house, everything paining me from the night before with Geo, and in addition now, the pain of all the walking uphill and downhill, but a refrigerator or a gas bottle for the borrowed stove from Pirata I had not. With many bags, we returned to Tanya's place, who now wanted to prepare lunch for us. With a coffee and a cigarette, which I desperately needed now, I stood on the balcony, where I saw Joe coming towards Tanya's apartment. At the sight of this man, Leo was already forgotten. In addition, I was happy, of course, that I could rely on Joe. But I was happy too early, because he had come to tell me that he could not help me. The mother of his children worked, the grandmother had something to do, and therefore he had to take care of the children. Why don't you bring them here? Tanya and I can watch the two while you and Marcio transport the chairs and table. I also want to know your children anyway, I asked innocently. Shrugging his shoulders helplessly, Geo just waved off. That wouldn't be possible, but gave no further explanation why not. He gave me a furtive kiss on the mouth and promised to come to my house later in the evening. During lunch, Tanya explained to me that I should be prepared of having one day Joe's ex-wife at my door and a terrible scene ahead. She doesn't tolerate if Joe is having a girlfriend, even though the two are officially separated. She is jealous as hell, Tanya continued, that she had already clashed with her because she had drawn wrong conclusions when she met Joe with his son at Tanya's place. She moved a big wave here across the street, screaming around that even the little son was completely scared. A big scandal here in the street. Only when Joe had brought her to his house she had calmed down, but it was all so embarrassing for him that he wasn't seen for days. My mood was down to zero, and this story about Joe's ex-wife didn't exactly make it better. Somehow I sensed that Joe would not return that day. Additionally, I got into strife with Tanya after we picked up the chairs and table. Marcia had offered to borrow me, and Tanya and I again went in search of a refrigerator. I was grumpy and tired, had absolutely no desire to rattle through everything again. The fact that I had spent far more money, in contrary to Tanya's attempt to save any, she didn't want to realize. Finally, I decided on a refrigerator for 200 instead of 220 reais. I was angry and Tanya was mad at me. After everything was arranged in the house, Tanya left me in the middle of the road like an idiot without another word. Angry and frustrated, I strolled to the shop opposite the restaurant where Leo worked, but I didn't cross the street to go there. Instead, I bought the bulb I needed and still hoped that Joe would come to me. Right now, I had needed him so much. The dispute with my only friend was getting very close to me. Alone in the house, I was overcome by a howling misery. Another Saturday I spent alone and feeling lonely. With horror, I was thinking of the Dia dos Namorados, the coming Friday. Instinctively, I barely counted on Joe anymore, even though we had already talked about it, and I had expressed the wish to spend the day with him. I had suggested buying beer and wine for us. Half jokingly, he had suggested participating in the form of bringing 20 condoms, to which I replied jokingly, "Are you crazy? Do you want to kill me?" In order not to fall completely into my depression, I washed my laundry, cleaned, and finally started to paint the chairs with the paint we had bought earlier on. This furniture was just ugly and worn because they had been for years in the attic at Marcio's mother, getting wet and dirty. So I had asked Marcio before the consent to string them with a new material and to repaint them. The color and materials I had chosen Tanya didn't like, and thus began the trouble already. At one point, I was so tired that I fell into bed exhausted and fell asleep immediately. Sunday I felt even worse, but yet roused myself to take a shower and then go to the bakery to drink coffee, because I still possessed no gas bottle for the stove. Coffee machines, very few people had them here. To Tanya I didn't want to go. How she had left me standing, I didn't need to give me this now. Besides, I certainly didn't want to run into Joe. He should not see my tear-stained face. At the bakery, I saw the motorcycle taxi. Suddenly overcame me a great desire to do something crazy. Thus, I was sitting a short time later, once again after a long time, as a passenger on a motorcycle to go and buy a newspaper somewhere. It didn't interest me much that I was being dredged by the driver, like with so many baianos. I had got used to it already. I could not help but had to laugh ironically when he made some very clear proposals. I could not even count anymore how many men here wanted to get me into bed, but the only one with whom I got into bed had let me down, and the other, for which I really had deep feelings, would not even go to bed with me, or could not, whatever. At home, I studied the newspaper for a second-hand gas cylinder and other useful things to continue afterwards with the painting of the chairs. Pirata, who lived with his family in the house next door, came over to install my bathroom door. In his presence I felt a little better. He was always in good humor and liked to make jokes. This morning he was quite impressed by the blue color I had chosen for the chair and my painting. "It looks very nice what you're doing," he praised me. But then Tanya and Marcio stood in the doorway. Tanya began to complain immediately that she had known I would have started with a painting without them and without even having a clue. Pissed off, I snarled at her that I finally wasn't painting furniture for the first time. Listless, I dropped the brush and went inside the house. Here I gave the borrowed stove of Pirata a thorough cleaning. If they knew everything better, they might as well do it themselves. I could hear her giving Marcio commands. Marcio painted, went to the shop, and helped Pirata while Tanya was scraping all the paint down again with a wood file. In her opinion, the wood had to be filed smooth before painting. Due to this, the paint obviously wasn't enough, and she had to get new paint. Unfortunately, it was a different blue. I didn't like it, but what should I do? Suddenly, Tanya apologized to me for her outburst. She had not meant it that way. The day before, she had been very nervous and pissed off. So was I. Nevertheless, I forgave her. We fell into each other's arms and were once again best friends. Nevertheless, I was bitterly disappointed of Joe for not having shown up at all, even though we could have needed his help. Pirata finally brought me a used cabinet so I could put my clothes inside. I was touched so much about this willingness to help that my tears of joy and disappointment at the same time ran free. We decided to go to the barbecue restaurant to eat something and met Leo on the way again. Since we were almost neighbors now, this could hardly be avoided. Unconsciously, I took Tanya's hand when I saw him. He didn't see us. I wondered whether I should leave it at that, but automatically it slipped out. Hola, Leo! He turned and came straight for me. Again his gentle touch as he looked me up. That's a whole new style, he remarked about my clothes. I was wearing jeans and a top in the fashion color purple, on one side showing my naked shoulder and my entire back. Working clothes, I replied boldly, which Leo of course not believed. These clothes are more likely to make the guys here crazy, was his comment. Was he jealous? Then he suddenly began to talk about the letter I wrote him and expressed the suspicion that he was impotent. I was pretty mad at you. I'm as normal as any other man, too. Why do you think should I go to a doctor? Do you really think I don't have all marbles? He laughingly asked me this. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Only then I found my tongue again. Why don't you act like any other normal man then? I didn't wait for the answer. I would not begin to discuss this issue now. I was depressed enough as it was, and turned instead the issue on my house. Leo again promised. I come over during the next days. I had long since ceased to believe what Leo said. The next day it could be completely different. Why don't you come with me for a beer? I asked instead. He refused on the grounds that I was with my friends. I would rather invite you again when you're alone. How could I make sense of Leo? I just knew that I loved him. And Joe? The man with whom I was happy such a short time, but would have liked to stay with. I knew now that both men were no good for me. In the evening, I accompanied Tanya to her house, hoping to see Joe. I had to talk to him to clear for myself what I wanted and what was important to me. But Joe was nowhere in sight. More frustrated and angry now, I returned home. If he believed he could come round and lay me down when the house was finished, he was mistaken. I felt terribly alone and finally called Leo, asking whether it bothered him if I came to the restaurant. No, it did not bother him at all, but he did not have much time for me since he was currently working in the kitchen, and it was pretty busy. However, he took a little time for me, caressed my back in his gentle way. I knew between us it was far from over. From the beer he had given me, I was tired enough to fall asleep immediately without thinking. At the beginning of the week, I took Joe to task, who uttered with his pretty and innocent look that stupid excuse he had gone out because he couldn't find me anywhere. To comment, this was too stupid for me. Do you want to stay with me or is it over? I asked calmly. Let's talk later. On one hand, escape, on the other hand, he was in a hurry to go to work. Yes or no? That's all I want to know. Yes, we are together, I received the answer. Then we really need to talk, I remarked.